Hello and welcome to another episode of Thoughts Per Episode, Classic Doctor Who edition. I apologise if you're watching this on any day that isn't a Friday. I did start recording this on a Friday, but it might be uploaded a bit later than normal. I've had a very busy week, but, you know, I didn't do one last week, so let's get into it. Today I'm going to be watching the Dalek Invasion of Earth, which I'm very excited about because it's the first returning appearance of the Daleks, and I will obviously know by the end of this video whether I was completely right or completely wrong about this, but if I know my trivia, I think it ends up with the departure of Susan? Again, might be completely wrong. And for the record, I'm not excited to see her leave. I'm excited for things to be shaken up a little bit in terms of the TARDIS crew, but again, I might be wrong. The Dalek Invasion of Earth, Part 1, World's End. The Doctor and his companions arrive in a London very different from what they remember. Okay, so I really like the premise of this episode. The idea of going to a future post-apocalyptic London where the Daleks have already invaded and ruined the world. I think the setup is done really well, where at first they think that they're at home in their home time because, you know, it looks like technology hasn't advanced very far or whatever, and everything looks kind of recognisable, like the London skyline looks fairly similar to what it would have been back then or whatever. But then slowly you start to realise things aren't right, like that sign which said emergency regulations, it is forbidden to dump bodies into the river, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, that wouldn't be like a sign put up in normal times. Maybe in COVID times, but not in normal time. I like that as our first indication that something's wrong, and then I like how the Doctor points out that they're under a bridge and they've heard absolutely no traffic overhead in London. I love this slow build up to the fact that something is very, very wrong, and that, you know, while this episode ends up being set pretty much 100 years in the future from when it was filmed, it's not really a futuristic looking future. It's like it looks like technology, and again, I may learn more things as the story goes on that contradict this, but for me, for now, it seems like technology has kind of stopped at a certain point and the Daleks have been there for a while. Now, it may be the case that the Daleks haven't been there for very long, and it just looks that way because this was filmed in the 60s and it's impossible to predict what future technology would look like, and kind of, it would be kind of a leap to design the setting to be like, oh, not only is it post-apocalyptic, but it's post-apocalyptic from, like, a time where 50 years in the future they would have had a lot of technology before the Daleks invaded or whatever. It is interesting to note that this is 40 years away from where we are now, so I'm looking forward to seeing some things in this episode that are like, oh yeah, well, you know, this technology's existed for like 30 years or whatever, and it's like something that we've had for years, or they completely overlook the idea that obviously like the internet would have been a thing and stuff like that. These are the kinds of episodes I've really been looking forward to seeing. Hi, sorry, Future Christian here, I'm a massive idiot. That's 200 years from the time it was filmed, and 140 years away, not... I got my centuries mixed up, it's easily done. A couple of things. First of all, at one point when they're trying to figure out what time they've arrived in, and it seems like they've arrived in the 1960s, Ian says, oh, a year or two off doesn't matter to us either way. I'm thinking, well, it should. These are your lives, and I feel like modern characters would have been more like, I've lost like 2 years of my life, everyone thought I was dead. I mean, I'm pretty sure they played with that in a Rose Tyler storyline. Obviously, we're not supposed to know that it's a Dalek themed episode, so the actual reveal of the Dalek coming out of the water at the end of the episode was very well done, I think. Obviously, it's called the Dalek Invasion of Earth, but again, this comes from a time before TV guides even, you know? Or maybe it would have been in, like, a magazine TV guide, but it's not the kind of thing where you press a button on the telly and see what the episode is called or whatever. Or maybe you could, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was in teletext. I don't know when teletext was invented. I like that the classic UFO is used as the Dalek spaceship, and that lines up with what we've seen in modern Doctor Who, and I always thought that was kind of weird. Why do they have classic UFO designed spaceships? And I guess that's just because that's like the first enemy spaceship we've really seen designed for this series, so I guess they just kind of went with the classic UFO design, apart from the TARDIS, of course, but, you know, maybe there's more to that as well. Maybe they're trying to say that the Doctor's ship is more unique because he's from a more intelligent species. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to sow the idea that the Daleks have been keeping an eye on Earth since Roswell or whatever. I don't know. I'll just have to keep watching and find out, won't I? The Dalek Invasion of Earth Part 2. The Daleks. The Daleks have taken over, and they capture the Doctor and Ian. So yeah, this episode immediately answered my questions about when the invasion started. It was 10 years prior in 2154, so all of the kind of old 1960s looking stuff is just a product of its time. I like how fucking snarky the Doctor is, where the Daleks are like, you know, telling him to come with us, and he's like, oh my god, no, we're not going to go with you. And the Doctor's like, leave this to me, Chesterton. Turns to the Dalek, I think you'd better release us. We do not release prisoners. We are the masters of the earth. And he's just like, not for long. Smirk emoji. I love it when the first Doctor is cheeky. I don't love it, jumping to the end of the episode, when the first Doctor gets taken to be, what was it Dalek said? He will be robotized. I don't like it because he was like legitimately panicking and afraid. That wasn't fun to watch. I don't like watching the Doctor be legitimately panicky and afraid. I found it interesting that they mentioned the Daleks were digging for something in Bedfordshire. Legitimately curious as to what that could be. I think it's also worth mentioning that back at the start of the episode, and I'm jumping around all over the place today, Ian mentions that they met the Daleks on Skaro and they destroyed them, and the Doctor's like, but that was 1,000,000 years in the future. But I'm like, wait, the whole point of a Dalek, and I know I've been told that they don't care about their own lore at this point of the show, but the whole point of the Daleks was that they were kind of like a weird mutation of the Dals, right? Or whatever they were called. And so they mutated and encased themselves in those Dalek shells or whatever. I'm guessing the origins of the Daleks just continually change, but I don't see any way in which the Daleks... I mean, obviously they get time travel later on in the series, but maybe that's going to be what they use to explain it. But I don't see how the Daleks could have existed 1,000,000 years in the past. Then again, 1,000,000 years is a long time. Maybe this was their original form, and maybe they just evolved into something else, and then they got mutated back into their original form. I don't know. I don't think it really matters. I'm doing exactly the thing I said I shouldn't do with Doctor Who in modern iterations, which is don't pick it apart for the lore because it doesn't hold up. Just enjoy what's on the screen in front of you. Still, where's the fun in not doing that? I like how the story is being structured, with Susan and Barbara being in the Rebels camp and Ian and the Doctor being prisoners of the Daleks, so we kind of get to see both sides again. I feel like they kind of did that with the original Dalek story as well. And last thing I want to say is the little science experiment thing in the prison, which was used to see if the Doctor was worth being robotized. I thought that was kind of weird. I don't know if it holds up under real science or if it was gobbledygook science or what. All I could really tell is it was something to do with magnets, and for some reason refracting the light onto the magnet caused it to do something different, which they used to be like, and that's how we open the door and escape. Oh no, it was a trap. The Dalek Invasion of Earth, Part 3, Day of Reckoning. Hiding on board the Dalek spaceship, Ian is taken to the mines of Bedfordshire. I really like how this episode opens with the rebels invading the Dalek spaceship and throwing the bombs at them, and the bombs clearly doing nothing, but they still have a pull the Dalek over moment. Pull the Dalek over, fuck you Dalek. I love a good Dalek pulling over moment. But then of course most of the rebels died, so... you know, not really worth it. Not really worth it to pull a Dalek over, if I'm honest. They do, of course, save a Doctor from being robotized. I was going to say, I don't know if robotization would even work on a Doctor, but... on a fucking Time Lord. But then you look at how the Master very recently handled the Time Lords, and you realise, yeah, they can be turned into computers. That's about 60 years away, though. We won't worry about that for now. Master? What's a Master? The only Masters I know are the Masters of the Earth, and that's the Daleks. So, something I noticed about this episode is there was a lot of Susan moments, and I was starting to think I was wrong about this being Susan's last serial, but now I'm absolutely positive it is. The second I saw Susan and David on screen together, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's it, that's the couple. First of all, they have that moment where they're hiding and they hear the Dalek executing that guy. That was a real hide in the bushes, hand over mouth horror moment, which was pretty cool. Or actually, that might have been a separate moment. There were lots of like being scared of the Dalek moments. Go figure. But there was a lot of dialogue between the two, like Susan saying that, you know, she just wanted to leave this place and go to a place that had never heard of Daleks before. And then David tells her that, and she's like, oh yeah, maybe I could bring you along. I'm sure the Doctor would let me bring you along. Or I'm sure Grandfather would let me bring you along, sorry. And he's like, are you kidding me? No, I can't just run. Like, nothing's gonna get better if I just run away. I need to, like, stop the Daleks. I need to fix this place. And then also Susan talks about how she feels like she doesn't have an identity because she's constantly travelling and never settling down. And he tells her that, he reassures her even that, like, yeah, when you settle down, don't worry, that'll come. You'll get an identity and everything. It'll be fine. We're getting some deep Susan lore in this episode. There's also a moment between Susan and the Doctor where the Doctor's saying that they need to get back to the TARDIS, but Susan, who's been won over by David at this point clearly, says that they need to go north to join the Resistance. David then joins them and asks the Doctor what they should do, which he's clearly tickled pink about because he's like, finally, someone who listens to me. But he's very nice and he says, oh, I think we should go north, obviously taking all the credit for the idea for himself, but you know, You know how that relationship goes with him and Susan. Also, this episode had a montage of Barbara, that scientist guy in the wheelchair, and that lady absolutely booking it through a deserted London, dodging between Daleks, hiding from them, trying to get from one hideout to another. And I think that might be my favourite sequence I've seen in all of classic Doctor Who. I was just grinning ear to ear the entire time. Just like the shots, the music, the fact that they somehow managed to shoot in London without there being loads of traffic everywhere. Like, clearly they must have closed streets off and stuff, but, you know, it just made me smile. It was so well done. It was charming is what it was. And then later on, the scientist decides to try and be a hero and go and test his new bomb, and sadly didn't work still, but he gave his notes to Barbara to go pass on to the Doctor. Meanwhile, yeah, as the synopsis says, Ian's basically just hiding out in a spaceship the entire episode. Don't know why that was the main focus on the synopsis of the episode, to be honest. This was clearly a non-Ian episode. I mean, he had some scenes, but you know. Oh, and we got our first ever mention of Dalekanium. The Dalek Invasion of Earth, Part 4. The Daleks Give Up and Go to the Beach. No, not really. The End of Tomorrow. The Doctor, Susan and David discover a nearby firebomb, left by Robomen to destroy London. Susan is very calm around the bomb, of course. She is her usual calm and collected self. After David disarms the bomb with a handy bit of acid he was, I guess, just keeping in his pocket to melt through it and take the clock off of it, which is definitely how you disarm a ticking bomb. Well, I don't know. It's like 140 years in the future. Maybe it's how you disarm future ticking bombs. Actually, I know nothing about disarming bombs. For all I know, that is how it works. Anyway, after they do that, David convinces Susan to leave the Doctor in a bush so that they can, I guess, scout ahead, which is really weird until you consider the fact that William Hartnell probably needed like a couple of weeks off, or however long it took to film this particular segment of it. Like, going into it knowing that they wrote these scripts in ways that certain actors could have time off instead of just forcing them to work every single week of the year, or whatever, you know, that makes this feel less weird. But if I'm just watching this from a perspective of not knowing that feels super weird. The fact that Susan agrees to it as well, like, there's some pushback, sure, she's like, we can't just leave him here, so on and so forth, but eventually she does just go with Dave. Even weirder at the end of the episode, and maybe this will be explained next episode, but it's mentioned that the Doctor is ahead of them, like, the area that they're going towards, the Doctor's already there, so I guess he just woke up and made his own way there, like above the city. I don't know. When I saw the slaves pulling a wagon, a whole bunch of them running along with a wagon for like the mines of Bedfordshire or whatever, it made me realise that, like, you know, the Daleks only invaded 10 years ago. This really isn't a sci-fi story that concerns itself with futuristic technology in any way. It's literally just like, what if the Daleks invaded Earth? And it became like a post-apocalyptic wasteland. They don't really go out of their way. Like, this doesn't need to be set in 2160. This could be set in an alternate 1960 something, like just a few years ahead of their time, and like they have to sort it out. Like, I don't know. I didn't live in the 1960s, so maybe there's some things in there that I'm not picking up on because they're like meant to be like slightly futuristic or something, and I just haven't noticed because it still seems old to me. But I don't think so. Like when the Roboman tells Ian his orders are to tell him to go back to work or whatever, and he's like, get new orders. Yeah, well done, Ian, that'll work. You sure told him. Last episode I was very pleased with watching them pull the Daleks over. In this episode, Barbara continues to be an S-tier character by fucking running through a Dalek checkpoint and just destroying them with a massive fucking lorry. She destroys like 4 Daleks. Absolute champion. And then the UFO promptly blows them up. Or I guess it's not really an unidentified flying object, is it? It's just a flying saucer. The flying saucer promptly blows them up, but they jump out in time. Don't worry about them, they're fine. Something I noticed is there's a shot where Barbara is leaving the warehouse in that, I don't know whether to call it a truck or a lorry, but as she's leaving, the lady she's with, whose name I've forgotten, jumps into the car while it's moving away. And obviously that's not a big deal in terms of the story and what's going on, but it made me think, like, they wouldn't let actors do that on set now, because that's a real moving vehicle and she could feasibly fall off and injure herself. That's technically a stunt, right? And this isn't like We're at the level of technology in terms of filming where I would notice if something was faked that was not faked. I'm not saying it was incredibly brave or anything, but just makes me think. I don't think that's something we'd see in a modern program. The episode ends with the two opposing parties both facing off against timorous beasties, if we're gonna put it the way David Tennant does. I don't know why I went for that, but I did. One of an Irvin variety, Susan versus the Alligator, which makes it sound like they're having a fist fight, which I would pay to see. Oh, I'm leaving that in. That was weird. I took an intake of breath and that happened. Anyway, and the other was the Sliver, the monstrous creature of which we've never seen before, which I don't know if it's meant to be alien or just some kind of weird mutation or whatever, but I do know one thing. It's a classic Doctor Who prop monster that doesn't look particularly like anything. It's just kind of like an amorphous blob with a pincer slowly ambling its way towards Ian and co. And what will happen to them? We'll have to find out next episode. Right now. We'll find out right now. The Dalek Invasion of Earth Part 5, The Waking Ally. I'm not sure why it's called that, thinking about it now. Ian and his friend Larry are chased by the Sliver, protecting the Bedfordshire mines. Luckily, a minecart appears, and they manage to jump into it, and the Sliver tries to jump after them, and they push it down. Well, first of all, they're smacking it, and they're just smacking this rubbery-sounding thing. And then when it falls... Hang on, what noise does it make? I need to go back and listen again so I can replicate it. It's all... There's a scene where the Doctor, Susan, David, and the other guy get chased into an underground tunnel by the Robomen, and they have to turn and fight them. And the Doctor ends up whacking one of them, the subconscious, with his cane. But it looks and sounds like he was really fucking whacking the guy. William Hartnell was really whacking the guy playing that Roboman with his cane. I felt quite bad for him. I also like the little touch where the Doctor stopped the guy from executing the Roboman. He was like, no, I don't take lives. No, if I don't have to. Tyler, that was his name. Tyler. I wonder if a Doctor's ever going to meet anyone else who has Tyler as one of their names. Now, we finally got a hint that there was some better technology at this era of time. For one thing, Ian asks why they're not mining, or is it Ian? Someone asks why they're not mining using modern technology, why they're still mining the old way, similarly to how I asked last episode. And then also when Barbara and other one end up in the hut with the two ladies who sell them out for some food. She talks about how I used to go to London back in my day with the moving pavements and the astronaut fairs. I'm like, okay, well now that sounds vaguely sci-fi and futuristic, doesn't it? But also, oh my god, can you imagine if moving pavements were a real thing? That sounds like it would be terrible. It felt very Nazi Germany the way those women sold out Barbara. And the final scene where she looks out the window and she goes, oh well, she'd have been captured anyway. Like, she's kind of trying to convince herself. It's quite tragic, really. And we all know Barbara wouldn't have been captured anyway because she's an S-tier character who fucking runs over Daleks in a massive fucking van. Van, lorry, truck, I don't know anymore. In this episode, we finally get to learn more about what the Daleks actually want on Earth. It seems that they want the magnetic core of the Earth, and then later on we learn that they are trying to degravitate the Earth to remove the core and turn the planet into basically a spaceship. And that made me realise something.
Someone tried to move the Earth once before.
That's right, this is what I wanted when watching classic Doctor Who. I'm finally starting to get all of these tiny throwaway references that are in New Who. I'm pretty sure that is the Doctor referencing this very episode all the way forwards in time to the Stolen Earth, the finale of season 4. I wonder then if Russell T Davies watched this serial once and was left wondering, okay, so they want to be able to pilot the Earth round, but why? And then made that future story to tie into this one. And that's pretty fun because that means that the Daleks we see in this episode, Davros is kind of behind them, and you've got a whole, sorry, it's been a while since I watched the episode because Davros is kind of more their pet, right? But those are Daleks which have been created by Davros at the very least, and they're being led by an ex-Time War Dalek, if I remember right, who, escaped the time lock and lost his mind because of it. Obviously none of this would have been the plan when this was written back in the fucking 60s, but it's fun to kind of link the lore together in a way that kind of, at least from my experiences so far, doesn't happen very often in Doctor Who. But anyway, let's forget all of that for a minute, and I want to bring up the fact that there's actually two very tragic scenes in this episode when the guy that Ian's travelling with actually finds his brother, and his brother's a Roboman who doesn't recognise him, and they end up killing each other. I believe he He shoots his brother, and then the guy strangles the Roboman brother as he dies, which is pretty sad. I think one of the things that makes the Dalek stories so compelling is just the brutality and the tragic nature of a lot of the things that they do and cause. But hey, we're made up for it by the cute scene between Susan and David when he makes a jump with a fish and they end up having a little kiss, which the Doctor definitely sees, by the way. He's like, I see something's cooking. It's like, okay, buddy, okay. I like it though, because it kind of means that he's proud to see Susan growing up and, you know, meeting someone and fighting for a cause she believes in and all that. I'm wondering when he makes the decision to leave her behind and let her live her own life and stuff. Like, is that happening kind of as the story's going on? Is it happening around about now? Also, one last quick note. I found it interesting that one of the Daleks says, "The Black Dalek will see you." They don't have names, as has been mentioned before. In another David Tennant episode, he's like, he meets Daleks with names and he's like, names? Daleks don't have names, and this kind of drives that point home. Anyway, on to the final episode. The Dalek Invasion of Earth, Part 6, Flashpoint. Barbara realises how to control the Robomen and orders an attack on the Daleks. I forgot to mention that we left off last episode with Ian in a bind. He is in the middle of the bomb, or whatever it is that they're sending towards the core of the Earth. But that actually tends to work out pretty well for the human race in general, because of course he disarms it from inside and makes a cheeky escape. Not only that, but he stops the bomb from even being sent right back down the second time it goes down, and it just blows up Bedfordshire instead of, you know, the core of the planet. Ian Chesterton saved the world, everyone. I mean, the Doctor helped by disabling the Daleks, and Barbara helped by telling the Robomen to turn on the Daleks, and the slaves helped by picking up the Daleks and throwing them around a place and pushing over the Daleks. Push over the Daleks. I love it when you push over a Dalek. But once again, Ian kind of continues to be the main driving force of a party. I found it weird how Barbara's plan was to get the Daleks to take them to their leader, and, you know, so she can see stuff in their base of operations and eventually obviously learn how to control the Robomen. But she straight up starts talking out loud to the lady next to her, whose name I've forgotten, about her plan to, like, smash up stuff or whatever, and the Dalek behind them shushes her, and I'm like, the Dalek can hear you. This is a Dalek you are actively trying to trick into taking you to this place, and you're just openly saying this stuff in front of him. That was kind of weird. But I did like how they started asking her questions about the incoming revolution, and she immediately just starts babbling about historical revolutions at them, continuing to be an S-tier character. Can you tell I like Barbara? There's also another weird moment where someone's talking to the Doctor and they say, "Doc, you're amazing," and he says, "Ah, thank you, but call me Doctor. I don't like Doc. I prefer to be called Doctor, thank you," and he's very serious about it. And this feels like the kind of thing that might be a response to, like, maybe a bunch of reviews start shortening the Doctor to just Doc, and the writers are like, we need to nip that in the bud. That's my theory anyway. In this episode, we got our first Dalek POV cam, you know, where you're looking down the eye stalk as they're advancing on someone, and of course this one's advancing on the Doctor, and he's just kind of like twiddling his coat and, like, is that how you say that? He's doing his thing, you know what I mean, and he's looking smug. But of course in future episodes we will see this POV as they chase down people who are screaming and running away and dying horrifically. I just thought it was notable that we got that this episode. This Dalek story brought us Dalekanium and the Dalek eye stalk POV. Also, when Barbara takes control of the radio to tell the Robomen what to do, she starts talking like this. Like, literally doing that with her hand over her mouth. I'm like, Barbara, what are you doing? I like how when Bedfordshire blew up, they used stock footage of, like, various nuclear bombs and volcanoes going off to kind of give you an idea of what was happening. Wasn't very convincing in my opinion, but maybe that's just me. And then of course the end of this episode, which is iconic, and I've actually seen this scene before because I looked it up. I was curious to see what it was like when the Doctor and Susan first parted ways. I obviously wouldn't have done that if I knew I was going to be watching through all of Classic Who eventually, but no, I've seen this scene before. It was really nice to see it in full context though, and it was really heartwarming. I think it really shows how far the Doctor has grown as a character, in terms of not just his relationship with Susan, but his ability to respect wishes of other people in the world and put people before him. If you remember how he was at the start of season 1, he's definitely come a long way. But even in episodes as recent as The Censorites, he was still having a lot of disagreements with Susan about her ability to make adult decisions and stuff like that. So this is a pretty fucking major one. I liked the whole conceit with with Susan having worn her shoe out to kind of give the viewer an impression of how much time they've spent running around this version of London and stuff. And it also kind of, even though it's not really strictly about her outgrowing her shoe with age or anything weird like that, it is kind of adjacent to that idea in terms of metaphorical, like, showing the growth of a character over time. That might be a bit of a reach, but I kind of think that's what they were going for. And the Doctor tells her he'll go and mend it, like, I guess he mends everything else in her life, and obviously he actually leaves her without a shoe, which kind of also emphasises how he's really leaving her in the lurch by just leaving her, even though I think it was the right decision. Like, she was going to pick going back to her grandfather for a life she wasn't happy with over, you know, someone she loves and someone who loves her in a possible future that she was really yearning for, and the Doctor could see that and Susan could see that, but she was still going to choose him. And the departure of Susan, the whole scene did a really good job of driving home the fact that, like, it was bittersweet, but it was also kind of wholesome and kind of like necessary, kind of a really important moment in Susan's life and everything, but also a moment that in that moment Susan did not agree with and was not happy about. Like, this is a sad moment for Susan. She does not go, well, I guess we can live our lives now, smiley face and sloppy kiss. You know, she literally, like, hobbles off and she looks like she's distraught, but, like, David tells her as well, like, he knew you could never leave him. And yeah, it's just well done, I think. You know, like, I get the impression that she would have been happy eventually, like, over time, after a few days or whatever. Should have missed her grandfather, of course, and he did come to he did promise to come and visit, and from what I'm aware, that would take him until his seventh regeneration in a Big Finish audio production. So, or was it his 8th? Maybe it was his 8th. I've not heard that, by the way. I just kind of know about it, and I would be interested to go and hear it now that I've seen all of Susan's episodes. But yeah, that's it. That's the episode. We've got our first companion departure. How wacky is that? Man, I'm curious to see what the dynamic's going to be like going forwards with a trio instead of the four of them. And the Doctor really being like a doctor instead of also like this grandfatherly figure. I don't have any bloopers for you today because I'm just on the ball with this talking out of my face stuff. But let's look up some trivia about this episode. I'm sure there's plenty. One quick thing before we do get underway. I know there's a non-canon, I believe, movie of Doctor Who called The Dalek Invasion of Earth 2150 AD, starring Peter Cushing as the Doctor. I don't really know anything about that movie besides the fact that it's not really canon and that it's got Peter Cushing as the Doctor, and I don't know if it's meant to be like a prequel to this particular time or if it's meant to be like a rewrite of this particular serial. Wow, I just praised myself for being able to talk, and here me go now. I can't say a fucking word edgeways. But yeah, I do just want to acknowledge that I'm pretty sure that movie probably comes from this serial, because this was probably the serial that was so well regarded that, you know, I know we already had an episode of the Daleks, but it's probably really cemented the Daleks as a villain, because I imagine this would have been an instant classic at the time. I love looking at trivia. Here's an interesting one. The character of Jenny, who I believe is the girl who was walking around with Barbara, was originally intended to be Susan's replacement, although this was halted over uncertainty about the future of the series. Huh. Well, that's two interesting things, isn't it? That she was potentially a future companion, and that the series was still not doing particularly well enough to really feel secure in a future at this point. There's a couple other trivia bits, but they're not really worth anything, but I'm glad I saw that one. Anyway, thank you very much. Sorry for the late episode. Thanks for bearing with. I also have a really busy week next week, so apologies if the episode is late or just pushed a week, but it's a two-parter, so I'll probably be able to get it done. The Daleks will be returning later in the series, but join me next week when instead we'll be talking about the two-part serial The Rescue. And I have no idea what that's going to be about, so maybe it'll be really cool, maybe it'll be really boring. There's always that possibility, but I'll try and keep it entertaining in this video series, as always. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't, you don't have to leave a like. I'm not going to force you. I'm not your master. Oh, I was going to mention, I'm just going to throw it in here at the end of a video. I think this is the first time the Daleks say exterminate. I remember that being absent from the first Dalek story, so actually we had 3 Dalek things this episode. If you like late trivia, then maybe leave a like, or comment and tell me about how wrong I am about everything. But if that's all, I think that's all. Is that all? I think that's all. Can I go? Am I allowed to go? Okay, I'm gonna go. I'll see you next video. Bye.